You do not know you are doing them. That is the part that matters most in this reading, and I want to establish it immediately before anything else. The two things, the specific, particular, completely unperformed things that have produced what this person is carrying for you, you are not doing them strategically. You are not doing them because someone once told you that doing them would produce a particular effect in the people around you. You are not doing them to impress or to attract or to create any specific impression in any specific person. You simply do them because they are part of who you are, because they emerge naturally from the way you are built, because they are the organic, unself-conscious expression of something fundamental about how you exist in the world. And they have undone someone completely. I want to begin with the first thing, and I want to be specific about it in a way that I think is going to produce a specific quality of recognition in you. Not the vague recognition of a compliment that could apply to anyone. The particular, slightly uncomfortable recognition of hearing something named that you have always done without thinking about it as something anyone was noticing. The first thing is the way you listen. Not listening as a skill, not the performed, deliberate, I am showing you that I am paying attention, listening, that people sometimes deploy in conversations because they have learned it produces a positive response. Your listening is something else entirely. It is the listening of someone who is genuinely, completely, without remainder interested in what the person in front of them is saying. There is no part of you that is elsewhere when you are listening. And that completeness, that specific quality of no part of you elsewhere, is something that people feel before they have words for it. That produces in them the specific, rarely experienced quality of being genuinely received. Not socially processed, not politely engaged with, actually taken in, heard in the specific detail rather than in the general shape. This person said something to you at some point, something that they say regularly, something they have said to other people in other contexts without it producing anything remarkable. They said it to you and something happened that was different from what usually happens. You heard what was underneath it, not what was said, what the saying was in service of, the specific, slightly buried thing that the words were trying to deliver without quite having the right vocabulary for it. And your response to what was underneath, your engagement with that layer rather than only the surface layer, produced in them the specific experience of being known in a way they had not anticipated. They went home from that conversation thinking about you, not planning to, thinking about you anyway. Let me describe what the first thing produces in this person, because the effect of the listening is the mechanism of the love, and I want to give you the full picture of it. It creates a safety, not comfort, which is the ordinary, friendly quality of being around someone pleasant, a deeper thing. The specific quality of safety that allows a person to be more fully themselves in your presence than they typically manage to be. Where the usual social monitoring, the continuous low-level tracking of how they are being received and whether they should adjust what they are offering becomes unnecessary because something in how you receive things tells them that adjustment is not required. They are allowed to be what they actually are with you. And what they actually are is something they have not been able to be as fully in most other contexts. That is not a small thing. In fact, for someone who has spent significant time in contexts that required the managed version rather than the full version, the encounter with someone in whose presence the full version is permitted is not simply comfortable. It is transformative. The love that developed from it is not the love of someone who finds you appealing. It is the love of someone who found themselves in your presence. It is the love of someone who found themselves in your presence. I want to stay with this for a moment because I think it is one of the more profound things in this reading. Most people who fall in love with a person, with the specific qualities of another human being that appeal to them, with the warmth or the humor or the intelligence or the beauty of someone who represents a desirable other. The love is directed outward toward the object of it. What happened here is different. This person did not only find you appealing, they found something in themselves in your presence that they had not been finding in other contexts. The full version of themselves, the unmanaged, unmonitored, genuinely expressing version that the listening created space for. And the love that followed is not only directed at you, it is directed at the experience of themselves that you make possible, which is why it is so difficult to move past. Because losing you would not only be losing you, it would be losing access to the most fully alive version of themselves that they have encountered. The version that is available in your presence and that has not proven available in your absence, regardless of how many other contexts have been tried. That is what produced Madly, not only what you are to them, what they are to themselves when they are with you. M. Now the second thing, and this one, I want to warn you, might surprise you more than the first. Because the first thing is one that people sometimes suspect about themselves, even if they do not often have it named back to them. The second is something you do that you have almost certainly never identified as the specific, potent, nobody else does this quite like you thing that it apparently is to this person. The second thing is the way you hold your ground without making it a battle. Let me describe what I mean precisely, because holding ground is something many people do, and most versions of it have a quality of effort or defensiveness, or the particular tension of someone who is bracing against something. Yours does not. When someone offers you a perspective that you disagree with, or a conclusion that does not match your reading of the situation, or a version of events that you know to be incomplete, you do not fold. You do not perform agreement in order to smooth the interaction. You do not allow the social pressure of the moment to move you from the position that your actual assessment produced. But you also do not fight. You simply continue to be in your position, calmly, without the escalation that disagreement usually produces, without the defensiveness that makes holding ground feel like a contest that someone has to win. You hold your position the way a well-built structure holds its position in weather, not by fighting the weather, simply by being more solid than the weather is forceful. And the combination of being unmovable without being combative, of holding your ground without requiring the other person to lose theirs, is one of the most unusual things this person has encountered in another human being. Let me tell you what the second thing produces in this person, because the two things together produce something more specific than either alone, and I want to give you the full picture. The listening produced the safety, the ground holding produced the respect, and those two things combined, safety and respect existing simultaneously in the same person, is a configuration that this person had not encountered before you. Because they tend to produce each other's absence in most people, the people who create safety are often also the people who move when pushed, who accommodate in the interest of the relationship, who value the warmth of the connection enough to compromise the position when the position creates friction. And the people who hold their ground are often the ones who do not create safety, who are solid but also somewhat defended, who hold their position in a way that has a wall quality to it, where the firmness and the warmth are in competition rather than in complement. You carry both, solid and warm, unmovable and safe, clear in your own position and genuinely receptive to the person in front of you. That combination is what is making this person lose their mind. I want to speak to something about you that neither of these things is. They are not techniques. I want to be explicit about this because there is a kind of reading that lands and produces in the listener the impulse to think about how to do these things more deliberately, to consciously emphasize them, to be aware of them in interactions in a way that optimizes their effect. That would produce the wrong result, because what is producing the love is not the things themselves in isolation. It is the fact that you do them without knowing you are doing them. The unconscious, unperformed, simply who you are quality of both of them is the entire source of their power. The moment they become deliberate, they become something else. They become strategy. And strategy produces a different response than authenticity does in people who have the discernment to distinguish between them. This person has that discernment. What they fell in love with is not what you do. It is who you are while doing it. There is nothing to optimize. Continue being exactly who you are in exactly the unself-conscious, not thinking about the effect way that you have always been. That is the only instruction available, and it is already being followed perfectly. Tell me in the comments if you recognized yourself in either of those descriptions, specifically the second one, because I think it is the one that will produce the more surprised recognition, the holding of ground without the battle. I want to know if that landed on something you have been doing so naturally that you had not thought of it as a particular thing you do. And tell me if someone specific arrived as I was describing both of them. I want to speak to the madly part of the title, because madly is a specific word and it deserves the respect of its own examination. Madly does not mean obsessively. Though intensity is present, it means in a way that exceeds the boundaries of what the person carrying the feeling has the capacity to fully manage or direct or moderate through any of the ordinary mechanisms by which people moderate their emotional experiences. They have tried. Because madly, when it is directed at someone whose feelings are uncertain or whose response is not yet clear, is not a comfortable experience. It produces a specific, almost embarrassing vulnerability in someone who is not accustomed to being vulnerable, who has developed through the particular experience of their life a relationship with their own emotions that involves some degree of management and direction. That management is not working on this feeling. The feeling is larger than the management, and the specific quality of being in love with someone in a way that exceeds your own capacity to contain or redirect is precisely the quality that earns the word madly. Not a choice, not a response they calibrated or decided on. Something that happened to them in the presence of who you are. I want to speak to what this person does with what they feel, because the feeling I have been describing has to live somewhere, and the living of it produces behavior. They watch you, not in the intrusive or uncomfortable sense, in the specific, slightly helpless sense of someone whose attention is organized around you in ways that are not entirely voluntary, who finds themselves tracking you in shared spaces without having decided to track you, who registers shifts in your mood or your attention with an accuracy that suggests they are paying more attention than the official register of whatever context you are in would explain. They study your face. Not for information necessarily, with the particular quality of someone who is simply not able to look away, who finds that looking at you does something that looking at other things does not do, and who has given up trying to understand why, because the understanding has proven less available than the experience. They listen to you differently than they listen to other people, with the specific heightened quality of attention that comes from having discovered that what you say contains more than other things contain. That following the particular movement of your thinking produces its own reward regardless of the topic. This is what the two things have done. They have made you the most interesting thing in the room. For someone who is in most rooms the most interesting thing, this is what the two things have done. They have made you the most interesting thing in the room. For someone who is in most rooms the most interesting thing, I want to add something to this because I think it is the piece that most clearly demonstrates why madly is the right word. Being the most interesting thing in the room for someone who is accustomed to being the most interesting thing in the room is not simply a compliment. It is a destabilizing experience. This person is not accustomed to having their attention organized by someone else, to finding their focus pulled toward a particular direction without having decided to direct it there, to feeling the specific, slightly unmooring quality of someone who has lost the voluntary quality of their own attention. They are used to being the one others organize around, and then you walked in, or they encountered you in whatever form the first significant encounter took, and something in how you exist, the combination of the listening and the ground holding, produced an immediate involuntary reorientation in someone who had not been reoriented by another person in a very long time. The reorientation has not corrected itself. It has deepened. That is what madly describes. I want to speak to something that I feel has been absent from your own understanding of what you produce in people, not because it was hidden or because you were being deliberately modest, because the two things I described are things you do without awareness, and things done without awareness do not generate the kind of self-knowledge that would allow you to see their effect. You have been underestimating yourself consistently in the specific way of someone who has been measuring their own impact on people using only the feedback that was offered directly to them rather than the full reality of what was being felt and not said, who has been operating with an incomplete picture of what happens in other people when they encounter you. The picture is more significant than you have been allowing yourself to believe. The listening and the ground holding are not simply qualities you have. They are qualities that produce specific, profound, lasting effects in the people who encounter them. That change something in those people's understanding of what is possible in an interaction. That set a standard that subsequent interactions are measured against and that most subsequent interactions do not meet. You become the reference point, and reference points are not forgotten. You become the reference point, and reference points are not forgotten. I want to describe specifically what it looks like to be someone's reference point, because it is a specific experience that the person holding you as one has and that you may not be fully aware of producing. It means that subsequent interactions in the relevant territory, subsequent conversations or connections or encounters with people who are trying to do what you do naturally, are measured against your version. And the measuring is not conscious. It is the automatic, involuntary kind that happens below the level of deliberate comparison. The kind that simply produces a slight sense of something slightly missing without the person necessarily knowing what it is that is missing. They know what is missing. It is the specific quality of the listening, the specific quality of the ground holding, the combination of both in one person. And every encounter that does not provide those things, which is most encounters, confirms the specific, particular, irreplaceable quality of what they experienced in you. They are not comparing you to other people. Other people are being compared to you. That is what it means to be someone's reference point for something as significant as genuine presence. Let me close with the full image of what has happened here. A person encountered you in the ordinary way that people encounter each other in some context that produced some form of interaction. And in that interaction, without announcement, without either of you having planned for it, two things happened that were not ordinary. They were heard in the specific way you hear, and they were held to the specific quality of engagement you hold everything to. Both of those things landed simultaneously in someone who had not experienced them simultaneously before, and the combination produced something in them that has been growing since the encounter rather than diminishing. Love, the specific, uncontainable, exceeds the management capacity kind because of two things you do without knowing you are doing them. That might be the most significant thing one person can be for another.